Okay, 4:32. Let's get started now. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Wan. I work on behalf of the College of Law based full-time in Phoenix. I'm the Assistant Dean for College of Law Phoenix Initiatives. Welcome to this event, the Legal Paraprofessional Virtual Info Session. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited about all of the engagement and the interest in this really exciting program. I wanted to go through a few organizational items at the top of the hour here. First off, thank you all so much for all of the questions that you submitted. Our moderator and panelists have combed through them, organized them, found themes and threads through them, and we intend to respond to all of the questions as best as we can in the next hour as we race through things. Don't worry, I will be putting in the chat our contact information. If you continue to have questions, specifically and really individual questions that are specific to your candidacy or your interests, please reach out to us and we will be sure to get everything answered. This session is going to be necessarily more general in nature, but I do think that you'll see there are threads that were of interest to many of you, and we're excited to get your questions answered. One note, the chat that is available to you in our Zoom, but will come directly to me, and I'll be able to see any additional questions as they come in. I'll note, though, we received a robust set of questions in advance, and we will do our level best to get through them all. Again, you'll have opportunities to follow up with us afterwards, and I'll put that additional information in the chat. At this time, I'd like to turn the session over to Keith Swisher. He's our professor of legal ethics at the University of Arizona James E. Rogers College of Law, and he directs our BA in Law, our undergraduate law program, as well as our Master of Legal Studies program at the graduate level. Keith, take it away.
Thanks so much, Leah, and thanks to all of you for joining. It's really an impressive list. We have, I think, around 100 registrations. Some folks, I'm sure, will take it via recording, but we have a number of impressive folks live with us now. We have potential students, we have current students, we have attorneys, we have court administrators, we have judges, and we have critical team members. Thank you all for joining. You've all recognized that Arizona is home to this really unique and fascinating legal paraprofessional program. And we're delighted to get to talk with you about it. And we've brought together three panelists who are really outstanding. I want to give them brief introductions with the note that this won't do them full justice. They each have lengthy resumes, but just so you can get a feel of them and why they're here. And then we'll go right into presentations afterwards. And then importantly, your questions we'll address as well. So first, we have Dave Byers. He's perhaps a person who needs no introduction. He's the director of the Administrative Office of the Arizona Courts. He was the past chairperson of the Board of Trustees for Arizona State Retirement System. He's been on the Board of Governors. He serves on the ABA Council, crediting law schools. He's won numerous local, national, prestigious public service and court administration awards, including the Berger Award from the National Center of State Courts. He has his bachelor's from Northern Iowa and his master's from ASU. You might have seen him recently playing a key role in Arizona's new digital repository for evidence, or his Legal Rebel feature in the ABA Journal, along with Justice Timmer. Thank you, Dave, for being here. We'll get to see your presentation momentarily. We also have Suzanne Porter, who's manager of legal service programs in the certification and licensing division at the Arizona Supreme Court, the Administrative Office of the Courts. Suzanne has over 2 decades of experience as a licensed New York attorney, and she manages these cutting-edge alternative business structures and legal paraprofessional programs in Arizona. We're, of course, today focused on the legal paraprofessional program. And last but not least, we have Christie Claremont, who's a new full-time member of the Arizona Law team. She's a LP program coordinator, perhaps the first full-time law school position of this type in the country, presumably won't be the last. Christie's fantastic. She's a JD alum. She has a teaching certificate. She's taught in Alaska and elsewhere, K through all the way through 12. She was a fellow in our child and family law clinic. She served the licensed legal advocate program addressing dire domestic violence needs. She's been a top pro bono attorney in the state. And she almost had an LP practice before there was LP program, providing unbundled legal services in the family law sphere. So thank you, Dave, Christie, and Suzanne for being with us today. On that note, I have the pleasure of turning it over now to Dave Byers to talk about this revolutionary legal paraprofessional program. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Keith. And I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. I've got a few, and I'll move pretty quickly because I know there's a lot of questions, and the best part usually is the questioning. But this got started with a task force that Chief Justice Bales introduced and created a while back. And the goal was to predominantly improve access to justice. And when I say that, we're not just talking about access to justice for low income, but middle income, and even middle class and upper income folks in the system. The problem is that legal fees are just out of reach. It's very difficult for the majority of Americans to access the legal system in our country. If you look at the data that different professors have monitored, you can see over time that the number of attorneys are leaving the practice of what we call people law. In other words, practicing for individual people and moving towards corporate work. And that's where the big movement has been over the years. And so you wind up with a system where if you're very poor and you commit a crime, you can get an attorney appointed for you, maybe legal aid, although legal aid only takes 1 out of 2 cases. Or if you're very wealthy or a corporation, there's lots of attorneys that will take your business. But the vast majority of Americans simply can't afford a ticket to utilize the American civil justice system. Also, the system, when people look at the types of cases, they may be surprised. We now see in our Arizona courts that 3/4 of the cases involve at least one party being unrepresented. In family courts, it's up to probably close to 90%. And on civil judgments, the judgments are generally very low. The average case in the United States has a judgment of less than $7,000. We all hear about these big multi-million-dollar judgments, but those are relatively rare in the system. Some people have said, well, why don't we just have more pro bono? But the reality is, when you look at the number of pro bono hours necessary to serve the need, it's just impossible. You would need hundreds of millions of hours. Lawyers would have to donate over 150 hours per lawyer per year to even scratch the surface of meeting the need. There's just no way to pro bono our way out of this. And frankly, when our task force was set up, Arizona had already done many things, encouraging pro bono, a tax credit that goes to legal aid. Lots of things were put in place, and we still weren't really getting to the point that we had enough providers to provide legal services to the citizens that need it. And so the dilemma is this. The legal costs are rising faster than the CPI. Consumers are skipping legal services, and do-it-yourself networks and systems are being brought online already. There's probably over 100 of them out there across the country, and they're not really regulated or connected to the bar. For lawyers, the dilemma is that for solos and small practice, people doing the business law, the people's law, when you really look at their billing, they're only doing about 2.3 hours of billing per day. Most of their time is spent on administrative matters, personnel, marketing, and so on. And many lawyers go to law school to be lawyers, not to be a business person, not to be a marketing person. And the result is fewer people are serving what I call the people law. This is a worldwide problem, and while we have a terrific system in America, really we rank 99th out of 126 countries in terms of accessibility and affordability of civil justice in the world. That's kind of stunning. We have a great system, it's just that it costs too much to participate in it. So 86% of civil legal matters reported by low-income Americans receive no or inadequate legal help today. Now this, what we're talking about here in Arizona, is really turning into a national movement. The Conference of Chief Justices, which is really the 50 state chief justices in the country, all passed a resolution calling for states to look and consider regulatory reform, innovations and ways to provide legal services in new and different ways. Even the ABA passed a resolution through their House of Delegates to also encourage states and lawyers to consider innovative approaches to the access of justice crisis. So there was a belief by our former Chief Justice that the current rules stifle innovation in legal services. We have in effect a monopoly controlled by state Supreme Courts that says every legal service predominantly needs to be done by a JD level attorney. This led to the creation of a task force that was headed by our Vice Chief Justice, Ann Timmer. I see Judge Cruz is on the call today. She was on the task force. She might speak up later. But they came up with 10 recommendations to improve the delivery of legal services. We're going to talk about just one today, and that is the creation of a new level of paralegal, a new level of paraprofessional, somewhat akin, I'd say, to a nurse practitioner in the medical field. A person who's not an attorney, does require examinations, requires education, character, fitness, required to be licensed, and ideally will serve the needs of low and middle income individuals. The legal paraprofessionals, though, are limited in what they can do. They can't do all things, just like a nurse practitioner can't do all things. But they're authorized to work in family court, our limited jurisdiction courts, both civil and criminal. So that would be lawsuits under $10,000, misdemeanor cases, evictions, debt cases. They're also able to work in traffic matters. They can represent people in administrative hearings, and the Supreme Court just approved their being able to handle and appear on behalf of both felons and misdemeanor defendants at a bail hearing. So let me play just a short little animation that gives you a better idea, I think, than I can do in a few minutes, explaining what a legal paraprofessional is.
For a long time, anyone in Arizona who wanted legal help knew right where to go: a lawyer. Lawyers have special education and training. Over the years, they have developed legal expertise to help consumers. But these days, there's a problem. More and more attorneys are focusing on corporate work. That means fewer attorneys are available for regular people. And many of those regular people believe the cost of hiring someone for relatively simple legal needs is just too much. So, how can that problem be fixed? Well, Arizona's Supreme Court voted unanimously to introduce something new. It's called a legal paraprofessional, an LP for short. It's someone with legal training and experience, just not as much as a traditional lawyer. They can do some things a lawyer can do, but not everything. Think of it like a nurse practitioner. That's the professional you often see when you go to urgent care or to a routine office visit. For some things, it's quicker and cheaper. But if it's more complicated, you're referred to a doctor. The legal paraprofessional will work the same way. They'll be able to help with limited matters and refer you to a lawyer when your needs are more complex. They might work for a lawyer's office, or they might be out on their own. The result is better access to legal services for people in need. So remember, a legal paraprofessional will be someone with special training who is licensed and regulated by the court to give legal advice in very specific areas. They won't replace lawyers, just as nurse practitioners didn't replace doctors. But they could mean greater access to justice for the people of Arizona. To learn more, go to azcourts.gov/access to legal services.
And so when we see across the world that when non-lawyer paraprofessionals are available to people, they use them. It may be a surprise to some folks, but other countries don't regulate the legal profession the same way America does. And For instance, in the UK, there's no regulation of people who work in the family law area. And paraprofessionals have been available in, say, Ontario, Canada for over a decade. And people do use them. And there are currently non-lawyer individuals who are authorized in various ways to represent people now. In Arizona, we've had 700 legal document preparers for over 15 years. People use them, they make a living, they serve a role. The other thing that comes up is lawyers, and sometimes people will say, well, the quality of work won't be as good as a lawyer. But studies have shown that's just not the case. And in fact, studies in the UK, where you have a blind peer review of legal work, shows that non-lawyers can achieve competent to excellent work, even as very similar or higher ratings than lawyers. This was a study that did on failed wills, and again, it showed that people who specialize in wills, even if they're a non-lawyer, tend to do a better job than a general lawyer who does maybe many things and only does occasional wills. Let me wrap up by saying when the task force came up with this concept, we went out to the public. We received lots of comments from lawyers, but we did a public poll of citizens in Arizona. We did focus groups, received written comments. And the result was in the public poll that over 80% of the citizens of Arizona supported the creation of a paraprofessional group like a nurse practitioner to be able to provide legal services in Arizona. All of these proposals were adopted by the Supreme Court effective January 1, and we are now in the process of implementing those programs, and Suzanne will talk to you a little bit more about the details, and we'll all answer questions as we get to that point.
Thank you. Shall I take it from here then?
Yes, thank you, Dave, for the insightful slides. And Suzanne, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully you can see my page. I'm just going to give a pretty high-level overview of the licensing pathways that are contained in the code. And this is the code that was adopted as of January 1st, as Dave pointed out. So there are two pathways. Oh, and it's not advancing. There we go. There are two pathways to licensure in the code. The first is through experience. The first actually in the code is education, but through experience, I'll just give a quick overview of that. If an individual does not meet the education requirements, they may qualify for licensure if they have 7 years of the previous 10 years working in that area. Within those 7 years, 2 would have to be experience in the practice area of the endorsement sought. So the area in which that individual would like to practice, there has to be 2 years. That proof of experience must be certified by a supervising attorney. That would include their state bar number, the dates of employment, and a certification that attests to the fact that the work performed meets the definition of substantive law-related experience, so that it is not just specifically clerical or administrative duties during that period. But of more interest in this group, I think, is looking at the education pathway. So the code sets out categories that include associate's degrees, JDs, LLMs, and the focus, I believe, for this group is the MLS and the BA in law degree. And it's notable that University of Arizona is the only one that has submitted approval to the court for a BA in law degree, even though that category is there in the code for others to apply. It does exist at University of Arizona. So within those categories of education, the code also breaks down the coursework that is required. So for each of the areas, for all of the 4 areas, you would need 3 credit hours each of evidence, legal research and writing, and professional responsibility, plus specifics in the area of endorsement. So for family and civil, 3 credit hours in family law and 6 credit hours in civil procedure. Criminal, naturally, 3 credit hours in criminal law, and administrative law, 3 credit hours in administrative law. These categories also include 120 hours of experiential learning that includes advocacy. This piece is still being built by some schools and some program directors. It is intended to be coursework outside of the traditional classroom experience. So moot court, mock negotiations, witness interview workshops, etc. All of these types of programs would serve to count toward those 120 hours. Dave did mention the exam. There is a licensing exam. We have administered so far the core and family exams twice. A third exam actually was administered today. And today was the first time that the civil and criminal law exams were offered. But for each of those exams, it's a 3-hour multiple choice exam. The core exam covers legal terminology, substantive law, client communication, data gathering, document preparation, and an emphasis on ethics, professional responsibility rules. The subject matter exam is the substantive law exam in the practice area of the endorsement sought. So as I said, family, civil, criminal, and we are developing the administrative law. It's not ready yet, but those are the areas that you would take the subject matter exam. They will be offered monthly, and there's no required order. The understanding from some was that they had to get the core first and then they would take their subject matter exam. That is not the case. We offer some flexibility in registration for, you could take core 1 month and your subject matter the next month. And importantly, you could add another endorsement if you qualified through experience or through education to add an endorsement to your license. After the applicants or the candidates pass the licensing exams, then they would submit the application. So I know some people have contacted me and said, I want to apply before I take the exam and I can't find it. The way that it's done so far, and things could change, it's a new program and we're developing and operationalizing it. But as it stands now, the other programs in the division invite the applicants to complete the forms after passing the exams. 7201 Arizona Code of Judicial Administration requires that application to be completed within 90 days of passing the exam. That causes some angst for some, given that there are 2 exams. And so we're counting that to start after the second exam is completed, keeping in mind that exams will have to be redone if it takes more than a year. So I know that's a really high level. I will stop sharing though, because I want to make sure that we have enough time for other panelists and to answer your questions. And you can return to me later with more questions.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and to Dave for those great slides, which I know anticipate a lot of the questions that we had received. You also mentioned that there are educational pathways, which of course, at the law school, we care about those, and we've been excited to try to develop those. It's still, we've used some of this as sort of early stages. Christie, Claremont just joined us recently, but we have just a couple of brief slides to just preview sort of what we have now and what subject to approvals and different sort of adjustments we hope to have in the future. So, Christie?
Yes, I'm going to try to keep this brief because I do know that we want to get to your questions, but we want to talk specifically about the educational pathways that we're developing right now at the University of Arizona. So first of all, we have the BA in Law, which was mentioned as the only program in the state and actually the first in the nation. So we are in the process of developing an LP track within the BA in Law program that would meet the state standards for eligibility. Of course, as a BA in Law, it's intended for undergraduate students and those of you that are transferring with your AA. We also have a concentration already in place with our Master of Legal Studies. The concentration already pulls the classes that we already had in existence that are done through. Everything is sponsored through the College of Law, so you get full benefit of all of the resources that we have through that very well-developed and recognized program. So, and this is intended for students who already have a BA or a BS, and it can be in any discipline other than law. It's just, subject to admission into the MLS program. And then, of course, our certificate program that we are hoping to work towards too, which would be intended for those who have a mix of experience and education and are just needing to pick up that specific coursework that's necessary to meet those eligibility requirements. And then here is just kind of an overview of what the concentration looks like right now for MLS students. Just please be aware that this is kind of in flux. It's something that we are still trying to kind of finesse and make sure that we're offering, because we take great pride in our programming at the university, and we want to make sure that LPs that enroll in our programs not only are prepared according to what the state is requiring, but also will set the standard across the state in terms of the services they're providing to their clients. And with that, I think we'll just go ahead and move into questions if everybody is ready.
Yeah, thank you. We on questions in particular, applause to the audience because we received, I wouldn't say a flood, but a steady stream of questions, which made this portion or will make this portion all the better. So thank you in advance to the audience for sending in questions. What we're about to do is go over a question and answer with the panelists. But I do want you to know they're authentic questions. There have been a couple of times where we've mashed up questions a little bit, hopefully not in a improper way, but some of the questions are literally ripped right from the pages of your questions. So, and then if there's time permits at the end, we could even go beyond that. So feel free to drop in, as Leah noted in the chat, additional questions. So with that, as Christie suggested, let's get right into questions. The first one, more on the general role of legal paraprofessionals. And we'll start with you, Christie. The regulations seem aimed at providing more cost-effective services to the public. How do you envision this new role of legal paraprofessional?
Well, first of all, I think it's a great observation, and kind of to piggyback on what Dave tried to explain and giving the background of the program. It's important to remember that the LP was created after the task force did the research, and it isn't just based on cost. It's also based on the way our legal resources are dispersed throughout the state, and the fact that we have kind of something that we call legal deserts. We have certain areas of our state where there aren't any lawyers. So I think this is both viewed as a geographic and economical program. So really the hope is that because to become a legal paraprofessional will be a less expensive way to become an educated legal professional, you will be able to provide services at a lower cost and also be able to afford to live in the areas that need these additional services. Very, very similar, and we'll keep drawing this parallel to a nurse practitioner, which was also developed to try to meet the needs in rural areas. So I think that the best way to look at the program is like a nurse practitioner program, to try to reach those areas and those areas of practice, so geographic and areas of practice that need additional services.
Excellent, thank you. This next question to Dave, your slides alluded to this, but essentially, what would you say to an attorney who wonders that LPs, while affordable, might not be as competent as attorneys or perhaps even negligent?
Well, we don't start out thinking that people are going to be negligent any more than we start out thinking some attorneys are going to be negligent. But I can tell you, the proof is already there. Other countries like the UK have had non-lawyers providing services for decades. And the studies have shown that they produce quality work in specialized areas. I mean, the difference is LPs are not going to be licensed to do everything where an attorney potentially or is in Arizona. But we also know from 50 years of experience, 50 years ago, the Arizona Supreme Court declared that writing a real estate contract was the practice of real estate law. Well, the real estate agents took umbrage with that. They did an initiative. They passed that initiative by 80% of the public voting in favor of it. And our Constitution now says, licensed real estate agent, non-lawyers, can practice real estate law. They've been doing it for 50 years. We have had, no big catastrophe because non-lawyers are practicing real estate law. We also know there's lots of non-lawyers in tax court and other places. So, and the experience of the paralegal program in Ontario, Canada is over 10 years old, and again shows high quality work. And the number of complaints against paralegals are no different than the number of complaints per attorney. In fact, with our document preparer program, we have fewer complaints per capita against the document preparers than we do against attorneys. So anyway, I don't see any evidence to suggest that if their people are trained well, they work in limited areas, that they won't produce quality work at ideally a lower price.
Thank you, Christie, for the thoughts on the role, and Dave for some, offering those assurances on future practice. The next question to Dave or Suzanne, what potential developments, such as rule changes or admissions changes, if any, do you see on the horizon, either short-term or long-term, for the legal paraprofessional program?
Do you
Well,
want to
we've
take it,
already had
Dave?
one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
No, go ahead.
Well,
The
we've
one-
already had one. The Demarcia Prize, people proposed expanding the role to allow LPs to do bail hearings. The way we did this, it's not just rules, but there's a thing called the Code of Judicial Administration, and it's a little bit more nimble. And because these are new programs, we expect there to be evolution and change and modification as we learn and grow. So I can't say there's anything specific on my list for next week, but it's set up in a way that as we get experience, we can change the code and evolve it over time.
And I'll just add to that, and it was also part of Christie's slide. There are standalone certification programs. The code allows for a certification program approved by the Arizona Judicial Council. And that may apply as we get proposals. We don't have any yet, but we may get a proposal for someone like a social worker to come through a specific program to train them to be an LP in a specific area, or LDPs. I know there's great interest for LDPs to qualify. They may not have the specific education or experience requirements under the code, and so perhaps there will be a certification program developed and approved by the Judicial Council, again with the agility of the code to be amended over time as well. So I just wanted to build on what Dave said.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and speaking of which, as Christie previewed, we're looking seriously at the certification route, and of course, I should footnote that nothing's approved yet, but but that's high on our minds, and we're looking forward to that future. The next set of questions sort of grouped around licensing related questions. We got a tall stack of those. Suzanne, if we could stick with you for a second. This question asks, how much would the annual membership / license fee be for the legal paraprofessional license?
So one thing that's exciting is that LPs will become affiliate members of the state bar, and the fees came out through administrative order that they will be the same as they are for attorneys. So for one and 2 year LPs, the first 2 years out, it's $345 a year. After that, it jumps to $505. So that's after the licensing process through the certification and licensing division. Once you sign the roll and take your oath, you will renew with the state bar, and the fees are the same as attorneys.
Great, thank you. I'll take the next one to give our panelists a break. Will there be liability coverage requirements for legal paraprofessionals, and can LPs be added to a law firm / attorney's liability coverage? So the answer there largely follows with respect to lawyers to date. So several states, Arizona among them, require disclosure of whether or not you have malpractice insurance, but doesn't require it. Only a couple of states have required it, and partly sometimes only for limited practice associations. So it's not required, but you'll need to disclose it. It's also certainly advisable. Also, yes, in all likelihood, you will be able to be added to the coverage. Certainly paralegals, for example, just by analogy, have been added to law firm or been covered by law firms coverage that I've been aware of. And so I don't know why that would change at all. Now, you might get a little bit of, this is new, this is exciting. You might have a little bit of insurer education to undertake, but I don't doubt that the coverage would be there.
Keith, just adding to that, the LPs will also be under the client protection fund coverage. And so just like a lawyer, they'll pay into the client protection fund, and if there's a claim from a client against an LP that's upheld, the client protection fund will pay out for that.
Yeah, and it's an excellent fund, and I think it was excellent to add LPs, making clients of LPs be eligible for reimbursement through the fund. Suzanne, the next question, it's a little lengthy, but I think more or less might be on the minds of some of our audience who have some amount of legal experience already. This one in particular asks, if an applicant can demonstrate 2 years of paralegal experience, does that help to qualify to become a legal paraprofessional as it would for the registered legal document preparer program? Would it help an applicant to qualify to become a legal paraprofessional if that applicant took the legal document preparer exam through the Arizona Supreme Court and became registered?
So the programs are very different with different educational and exam requirements. And so, not to be a lawyer about it, but help is a difficult word to address, in that there is a character and fitness component and an overall application that would be put together. For the routes to licensure, as I said, they're very separate, except if the person was coming with an associate level degree, which would require that 1 year of supervision with the attorney's bar number and an attestation that the work was of the nature expected of a paralegal. So it would absolutely be a necessity for someone coming with an associate's level degree. And I know I glanced over very quickly that there was an associate level pathway to licensure, as well as the programs we're discussing today. But it would be helpful in that, number one, it would probably prepare them for the substantive law portion of whatever they intend to pursue, whichever endorsement area they intend to pursue. So while it's not a specific requirement or something that would necessarily give an applicant an advantage over another person who also met the requirements of the code, I could see how it would benefit someone to have that and to build their application that way, and also to argue that they meet the requirements for the associate level degree. So otherwise, the code does restrict it to 7 years of the previous 10 to bypass the education requirements. So you still would have to meet the education and exam requirements, but it would be helpful in other ways, I suppose.
Great, thank you. And Dave, if we could ask you this next one, what will the licensing exams, and Susanna duly, preview that there's, general and a specific, will those be available online in the future, or might they be available online in the future?
Well, they aren't now, and we don't know exactly how we would do that. Maybe the university is further along on this than us, but given test security and how we would exactly do that, we haven't figured it out, or the cost of that. So right now, no. I think Suzanne's considered the possibility of offering the physical exam at different locations in the state, so people wouldn't have to always come to Phoenix. Yeah. It'd be great to find some way to do it online, but we've got to do some work to figure that out. And also understand that in Arizona, every profession that's regulated, the regulated have to pay the cost. There's no government, taxpayer, general fund money that comes to subsidize these things. So everything we do, you've got to charge back to the regulated. And so that's got to be taken into account when you start looking at online testing.
Thank you. Suzanne, one more question in this category. I feel like you kind of touched on it, but I'd like to ask it because it's a great category of individuals who have questions. So this one says, I'm a high school graduate and thinking about how I can become an LP in Arizona. Am I eligible for a standalone LP certificate program? And are there any such approved programs, which I think that last part you already addressed.
Right, and unfortunately it was to say that we don't have any yet, but that would be a standalone program, as we've said a couple of times now, but so not currently. Right now, if that individual were to develop practice experience for 7 years, say as a paralegal, they could qualify. That's a long-term plan, though, if they wanted to bypass the education requirements. But as it stands, the code education requirements set out what is needed for either an associate's level with a year of experience, or through either the BA or the master's or JD programs. So currently we have what's in the code, but keeping in mind that there is some agility. If we see over time that there is a specific category that we would think needs to be expanded, we would discuss that with our board of non-lawyer legal service providers, bring it to the Judicial Council, and try to make those amendments if we saw that something was creating a barrier that we didn't intend.
Great, thank you very much. Suzanne, if we could stick with you for this next sort of grouping, which is the educational requirements or pathways for licensure. So the first question is, maybe we should have directed this as specific, but we actually got this question. If I obtain a University of Arizona BA in law degree with the required coursework, am I eligible to sit for the LP exam?
That's an easy one, yes. And some of the attendees may actually be wondering how you qualify for the exam. And as it stands, we are expecting individuals who intend to register to understand the code requirements and that they can register. We're not doing an overview of credentials or coursework before that. We hope this doesn't create a problem where people get through the licensing exams and then somehow don't qualify. I have run some webinars from time to time to try to help explain what those requirements are. And I work individually with people, of course. And as we work more and more with your school and with other schools, we hope that people will understand the code requirements before they get there. But the answer to the question is yes, you qualify to sit for the exam. Now, keeping in mind that you need the particular coursework for the particular subject matter that you intend to sit for. Core exam is one thing, but the subject matter you would need for the application to have had that specific 3 credits or 6 credits, depending on which area you're going into. But yes, you qualify to sit for the exam with that BA in law.
Thanks very much. And one plug that I'll make, you might have all seen it, but in the chat, Leah had posted a number of documents, including that'll be relevant for any attorneys who want CLE credit. One of which is the Arizona Code of Judicial Administration, the particular section that governs this, and some of the pathways that Suzanne outlined earlier are covered on there. And then the next question relates to those particular regulations require a minimum of 120 hours of experiential learning that includes content on advocacy. Can this be done remotely or at an office near me or at my current office? We also had a related question if you wanted to opine on whether this could be done through a simulation type course rather than an internship or clinic. But Suzanne, if you wouldn't mind touching on
yeah, and this is one of those areas that I think is still being explored by everyone, including the court, as to what qualifies and what type of experience we would expect in those programs. But absolutely, we're looking for flexibility. I don't know if the entire thing could be done remotely unless it was sort of Zoom client interviewing. I'm not sure it could be sort of an online on-demand program to click through and say that that's gaining experience dealing with people. But I could see that remote work is obviously becoming more and more acceptable, especially during the pandemic. But it is, as I say, flexible. It's supposed to be outside the traditional work experience. And in some ways, it's supposed to be more targeted than a placement or an internship or externship, given that it is to provide that direct training. So in addition to the coursework and the substantive law that one would learn in a evidence class, for example, how do you question a witness? So then put those skills into a mock situation, in mock trials, or as I say, negotiations, settlement conferences. So it's a bit more tailored, and then something later on that would be an externship or an internship would apply those skills. So it's still a teaching environment and a teaching opportunity, but there is flexibility to look at all sorts of ways to earn that experience in advocacy.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to hear about the remote sort of live possibility. Linus Kafka, he might have had to go to class, but he's been helping students with these pretty involved, but pretty exciting, but remote experiential learning possibilities, partly due to the pandemic, but partly due to sort of changing culture around work. And so it's good to hear that might be on potential. Then the next category of questions was grouped around program or classes. I'll start out on that one. Do we have to enroll in classes or just this program? Will individual courses be available, or is this a full program that must be taken? So it's sort of to go back to one of Suzanne's point. It depends a bit. The way we've been looking at it is more programmatically so far. We have the BA in law, the MLS program, although not ready yet. We hope to have certificate programs. Though if consistent with the regulations and the court's wishes, I mean, if there are students in the future who need to, sort of backfill or take a couple of classes that they missed, and that works with the court, I mean, we would look to welcome them. But at the moment, it's been more on the programmatic level than just a course, take a course here or there to fill it out. And then next, Christie, will the classes be available online? May an out-of-state student participate?
Absolutely, yes. To the out-of-state question, online, most of them. There are some options because we really are trying to give a full platter selection, of courses. And some of those courses are through the law school, and those are in person only. So if you're choosing to take one of those classes, then you would need to come to main campus to be involved in that selection. But as far as the courses, the baseline courses required, and speaking mostly from the MLS, because we've had that one with the concentration, the courses are the curriculum is the most nailed down. So I can say confidently, yes, you could take this out of state. The only sticking point I would have is the experiential learning piece. We are structuring this more as an internship or a clinic. It's going to have to be kind of a case-by-case basis, because some of you do have already access to great experiences or already working in a legal setting in a lot of different situations that would work there. So we do have the ability to try to supervise you remotely, meaning if you live outside of Tucson, we can coordinate with you and make that an internship credit. So lots of possibilities for out of state or out of the area people that are planning to move to Arizona. If you're living out of state, you wouldn't want to become an LP unless you're going to move to Arizona right now, because only Arizona is offering this program. So also keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good note about how unique the program is. Although of course other states are considering similar options, but at the moment, there's only one legal paraprofessional program. And the one related question was, when will the classes start? Is there a legal paraprofessional program in the spring? To the extent for our BA MLS, our classes run year round, and we do have online classes as Christie duly noted. So I think that's the answer to that one. Christie, back to you. What is the cost for courses, tuition? Is financial aid available?
I think you really can come at this two ways. We're a university, so of course we're going to be wanting people involved in our degree programs. That's kind of how we're set up initially. So there is a per credit cost. It's $650 for the MLS program, because you're taking graduate level courses in that program. If you are not enrolled as a degree seeking student, financial aid is not accessible. You have to be a degree seeking student for those resources to be available to you. So that is something that we're working on while we're trying to develop our undergraduate and our standalone certificates, is different creative ways we can do to make this accessible, and the funding of that is a piece that we're all trying to problem solve together.
Thank you. We also had a question from presumably one of our current students asked about, can you add on the MLS concentration if you're already in the Master of Legal Studies program? And yeah, you can. Now, depending on where you are, may or may not elongate your studies, but we would welcome you for longer if it works with your goals. And Christie, do you think, another question, do you think that U of A will create a certificate instead of making students take the master's program? I kind of feel like we answered that one, but we can't enroll folks in programs that we don't have yet, but we certainly alluded to it. Maybe we'll leave that one at that. We also had a question about, can I just take professional responsibility and evidence, which are two core required classes for any LPs in any one of the four specific endorsement areas? You can. Christie mentioned we have non-degree seeking pathways. I would just urge caution that you'll want to be careful that it's a package that's consistent with those regulations at the end of the day. I mean, we welcome students who are ready. Those classes are great, but we also want to make sure that it's consistent, because there's not, for example, if you read the regulations, there's not one that just says take these two courses and you'll be good to take the exam. So we just want to urge a little bit of caution there. Christie, will there be any exam prep courses? Are your legal courses ABA approved?
All the courses are ABA approved, so rest assured with that. All the courses are offered through the College of Law, which is a fully accredited institution through the ABA. So that is totally taken care of. As far as exam prep, it's in development. The hope is that our program itself is enough that's going to prepare you. You're going to gain the knowledge that you need through the classes to be able to prepare for the exam. But I also envision that there will be a lot of services that'll be coming that do that exclusively as far as exam prep. But it's so early in the program that I really think that that's something that you're going to have to just kind of hang with us as we all learn. And as Suzanne pointed out, one exam hasn't even been developed yet. So There is an exam guide that is online at the court. I believe it might also be in the chat, if I remember, along with the materials. So there are some preliminary guides out there to get you started. It's not, there is some coming, and more as we learn more will be developed as we go.
And can I just add something to that? Just after the first exam and before the second administration, I did work with the State Bar. Dave put me in touch with a group there, and that group decided to put together some resources that the State Bar already had, and they have a package that they put together. We've linked that on our website too, to help people who maybe have been practicing for 10 years and have to go back and brush up on what the law specifically says and to be tested on a multiple choice situation. So the State Bar also has a number of resources that may be helpful while those exam prep classes are being developed.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. One related question on this was, will internships be required? Internship by any, so there's an experiential learning. We touched on it earlier. So yes, that's required, and you would want it because otherwise you might run the risk of not meeting the regulatory requirements. So yes, that type of learning will be a requirement. One note, we also touched on tuition, that we have different, depending on where you are, where you're entering, there's different tuition amounts at the U of A. So undergrad rate differs from the MLS online rate, which differs from the MLS in-person rate. And so just to add on to what Christie said, that the rate can depend on what your status is at the U of A. There's a tuition calculator online. Any one of us are happy to answer your questions in particular about tuition or financial aid. So just a further note on that, tuition costs can vary a little bit depending on where you're entering and what program you're looking for. The next category of questions that we had received in advance was, and I'll pitch this one to Dave. Will legal paraprofessionals have access to their clients' court cases via ECR online like attorneys currently do?
Yes.
Great. That's a simple one. Thank you. And we got a few endorsement area questions. You'll recall there's limited criminal, limited civil, administrative, and family law. On the administrative law, we got a question. Will a legal paraprofessional be able to represent clients at the Office of Administrative Hearings? Suzanne, do you want to touch on that one?
We're still building that portion of the program. And so the code specifically says in agencies that allow it. And so we have to do that building of that portion. So currently, I don't know yet. I would suspect that would be one that would likely be applicable. But Dave, do you have any additional information?
Well, yeah, the Supreme Court's the group that regulates who can practice law. And so they have authorized a person meets the qualifications to be able to do this. I don't imagine anybody's going to, object over the Office of Administrative Hearings. But in fact, we just did a national program on this, and several states that are looking at this are clamoring for folks to help in administrative law hearings. So I think this is going to be a ripe area, whether it's welfare hearings, special education, housing, MVD, on and on and on. So yeah, that's the plan. Yes, they should be able to do that.
Thank you. Next question, Christie. We had a couple of questions. I'm grouping a little bit, but for example, the U of A, as well as the great legal advocate program in the context of domestic violence advocacy. There's also, we mentioned document preparers, David touched on, were pre-existing. So the question is kind of, what's the difference between these roles if it's, easy and efficient enough to summarize?
So you really could, if you are someone who has a question about these different roles, I really encourage you to reach out to me on an individual basis, because you really could do a deep dive in terms of the different requirements educationally. And really, there are a great deal of differences between what you are allowed to do. As if you are talking about a person who does domestic violence, but is a legal advocate preparer, document preparer, that person, you aren't allowed to give legal advice. That isn't a person that has been licensed or trained you're not going to court with them. I mean, you can sit in the back as much as a lay advocate is allowed to do as a support service, but you're not going to be advocating on their behalf in court. So there are very, very important differences. The most important thing I could tell you about the LP and why we're so excited about it is because this is a first. I mean, I can't say that enough, a first in the nation of someone who is not a JD to be able to go to court and advocate on behalf of your client. And so it's really important to understand that this is brand new. This is not a document preparer. Document preparers should not be giving legal advice. You haven't been given the training to do so. So it's really important. And like I said, I could give a whole nother course or class or info session on the different types. And I'm happy to do that. Please reach out to me individually or call me and we can have a conversation about it. But it really is important to know that basically legal advice and training are very different.
Yeah, no, thank you for that overview and invitation. Last question we got in advance related to the civil practice endorsement. And Suzanne, the question is, as an LP practicing in the civil endorsement area, would I be able to assist in personal injury matters in a limited jurisdiction court?
Yes, well, and so assuming that the amount is under 10,000 and it applies in that court, keeping in mind too that the appeals process does not apply to LP, so appeals would likely not be included, but I know that's not what the question asked, but so yeah, if there's a negligence case, a dog bite, or other personal injury case that was below the threshold amount, then absolutely that's allowed.
Great, thank you. We also got a question live for the experiential learning requirement, and this primarily, I guess, was asked in the administrative law endorsement area, but for the experiential learning requirement, must experience be under the direct supervision of attorneys, or can it occur in an administrative division without direct attorney supervision or interaction?
I'll answer that if you're looking to me. The idea is that the 120 hours of experiential learning is part of the curriculum, so it's not necessarily even a placement type of a situation. So it could be a mock trial under the direction of a professor at U of A, for example. And so it's not that we would expect individual applicants to go out and seek sort of 3 weeks of work somewhere. It's intended to be a training session to allow that individual to develop advocacy skills, hopefully through the school, through some creative programming.
Thank you. Yeah, and another live question, if I could stick with you just for a moment, Suzanne. I know you've taken more than your fair share of questions,
okay.
But there's a couple. So the question is, what happens if someone passes the exams but does not have sufficient experience or education? Are they given a year to get it before having to retake exams? Or perhaps another way to put it is whether the candidates are allowed to sit for the exam if they don't have sufficient experience or education, the last of which you might have touched on. But
well, that's a very common question. And so I wouldn't advise that people say, well, I'm going to take the exam now and I'll just fill that in later. But technically, I suppose the answer is yes, in that the exam is good for 1 year, or you wouldn't have to retake the exam, provided the application was completed within that time frame. Keeping in mind there is a 90-day provision, and so without overcomplicating things, there's another section of the Judicial Administration Code that requires that 90-day completion, and if it falls outside of the 90 days that your application is complete, you have to seek permission from the board. So there's some hurdles and complications to doing it that way, but I wouldn't say there's an absolute prohibition against somebody taking the exam before, maybe taking that last piece. They didn't have, an evidence class or professional responsibility. So we can discuss that in more detail if individuals have questions for Christie.
Thank you very much. We had, let's do one last question. We're 1 minute over, but I want to make sure everyone had their full hour. We started at 5:30 or 4:32 or 3 or so. I see John had a question for John Taylor, it looks like. Would you like to ask your question before we sign off? Okay, well, maybe we'll get it answered offline. Thanks for the hand. when will another live question was, when will the next exam be available to register for? Suzanne, did you already touch on that one?
So that will be posted. We're moving online, and so we've gone month to month for posting, but we did administer an exam today, so I would expect it to be around the 20, wherever that, the week of, in late October anyway, for the next exams. But so registration would open on October 1st for that. So watch on the website. We can post the date in advance, but registration will likely open on the 1st.
Great, thank you. Well, that's actually, I think, a good place to end. It shows there was an exam today. Suzanne was here with us. Dave only presides over like 10,000 employees, literally. We're so grateful that the two of you joined us. Christie and I couldn't be more excited about this development. The BA and MLS were all about already a new class of a new category of legal paraprofessional legal. This LP program is incredibly exciting and unique, and we appreciate so much the time of the panelists and the audience attendance. Again, we're happy to answer any questions offline. There's a number of different ways to contact us in the chat in the accompanying materials. On behalf of Arizona Law and the team, thank you so much for joining us for this very informative information session. I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Bye, everyone.